Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Newsagent podcast. I'm Susie Lysett, Goodlord's Senior Content Executive, and today I'm joined by Goodlord's Director of Tenancy Services and our resident energy expert, Rik Smith, to take us through an update on the energy and cost of living crisis in light of the latest energy price cap increase. So thanks very much for joining me again, Rik. I sense that this could become a bit of a regular feature with the price cap increases.
That's right. So that's also off the back of the news that these energy price cap changes has now moved from being every 6 months, where we were used to it in October and April, to now every 3 months. So that means, yes, quite possibly these updates are going to be more frequent, but maybe none of them quite as severe as today's, hopefully.
No, well, hopefully, I think that is the key word there. But for those of you who didn't listen to the last episode that Rik joined me on, if you could perhaps give us a quick recap of your background and perhaps why we at Goodlord, we call on you to talk us through these energy updates.
Sure. So, so my name is Rik Smith. I'm the Director of Tenancy Services here at Goodlord. And for my sins, I have both worked at an energy supplier, setting the price of gas, electricity at British Gas. So I was there when we put up prices by about 10% in 2013. And when the Conservative government led by David Cameron effectively asked everyone to cut the green crap from the energy bills. So they went down by £10, and we'll actually potentially talk about some of the consequences of that decision today. And then more recently, I worked at Uswitch, the energy price comparison website, where I was also their energy spokesperson. So I've had quite a long time in the industry, both monitoring, observing, as well as at times setting the prices and driving the competitive energy market at Uswitch. So yeah, energy is in my blood, and also in my training with my degree in energy policy from Imperial College.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good overview, and it's nice to know that you're not to blame. You're not behind the setting of the prices as it is today. So that's good to hear that you're just bringing that expertise to the table.
Absolutely. So so when you sort of ask who is responsible, it used to be the energy fat cats at the likes of British Gas, E.ON, and npower, etc. But now the energy price cap is effectively set by the government. And so they're the ones that set the maximum price per unit of energy through the energy price cap. Now, the role of the energy price cap today is very different to the intended role of it when it was first introduced. But either way, what we end up with is a maximum price, which currently is the only price for energy really out there in the market, being set every 3 months by a mechanism, by a spreadsheet, if you will, controlled and run by Ofgem, which is the regulator in the energy, electricity and gas markets.
And so perhaps, Rik, we should talk through, because it was only this morning as we're recording it today that they announced the next price cap increase, which will take effect on the 1st of October. Could you perhaps talk us through what's going to be changing on that date?
Yeah, so let's talk about the fact that we're all domestic consumers. We all have houses and we all use electricity, and 80% of us use gas. And those prices that most of us are on, over 80% of UK households are on the standard variable tariff. That means they haven't fixed or chosen to fix their prices. Now, in hindsight, that would have been great to do 6 months ago, 12 months ago. But most of us are on this standard variable deal, which at the moment is the cheapest. And it's that standard variable deal which has got the price cap applied to it. Now, the price cap is the maximum price that kind of tariff can be charged at. And so from October, that price will change, and that price will run from October through to the end of December, where it will then be set again based upon the calculations of monitoring the fair cost, being at the point fair cost, of energy to UK households. So there is a regulated amount of profit in there. It takes into account all the costs associated with getting that energy to you and sending you your bills, etc. And that's really what the spreadsheet does. It is not a subjective thing. It is very objective. And that's really the idea. And what was announced today was, in effect, an 80% increase in the cost of gas and electricity for the average household. So remembering that this is on a per unit basis, so there's an average number of units that houses use. So think of a 3-bed semi. Right? That's what we're talking about with 2.4 children, kind of thing. That's what we're talking about, and parents to go with those children. That's what we're talking about, and we're talking about that price on average going up by 80%. So that's from on average of £1,971 per year, going all the way up now to £3,549. So quite an astronomical increase. Now, what's driving that is really where the interesting thing is. And the reality is that it is nearly all, majority of it, being driven by the increase in the cost of the raw gas and electricity that's being delivered to you. So it's not really about the pipes and the wires. It's not about the energy supplier's profit. We can come back to the profit word in terms of who is making more money as a result of this. But the reality is that as a result of a 131% increase in the wholesale cost of gas and electricity, that is what is feeding through to push up these bills. It used to be said that the wholesale price was really 50% of your bill. But up until recently, it's still about 50% of your bill, but it's soon going to be making up more like 2/3 of your bill, nearly 3/4 of your bill. And that's just because it has got more expensive. And we can blame Putin and the geopolitical situation with where we get our energy from is really where we can lay the blame.
Should we be concerned at all about the actual supply of energy? If obviously the prices are increasing, but will that supply be there? Do we have to worry about running out at any point or having to restrict use?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and there isn't really a firm answer. So the gas, electricity, oil houses are all participate in a market, different markets to be clear, but in a market. And what is it that makes the price go up? Now, in relatively pure markets like oil and gas, electricity, it is supply and demand. It comes down to whether there is enough being created and whether the demand is there. Now, the problem is that there is a concern that there may not be enough gas available. And it's the gas bit that is really important, because we in the UK use a lot of gas to generate electricity. And that's why the electricity price is going up, because the cost of gas is going up. And so in this market, the concern, it is only a concern, it is feeling, it is not necessarily born in reality, but there is a concern that there will be less gas available. And so as a result, in effect, those market traders are more willing to pay more for that gas, because there is a concern that they may not be able to secure all of the contracts that they need. And that is, again, the sort of consequence of the balance between supply and demand. Now, some countries like Germany are actually pursuing policies of asking members of the public, as well as public organizations like schools and public baths and swimming houses, to effectively reduce their gas demand. They've in fact turned off the heating in their public buildings until October. You might go, well, why are you heating public buildings in the summer? It's a good question. But nonetheless, they are taking these relatively coarse actions and encouraging households to, in effect, be more mindful of how they use their energy and what they use it for. To go with that, other countries are also discounting the price of public transport in order to encourage people out of their cars and onto public transport, where it is more efficient. You can transport more people more easily and much closer together and use less energy. So lots of countries are quite actively encouraging the population to use less energy and be more efficient about it. Whether those actions are enough to ensure that prices don't rise further is another question. We will soon see. But many countries are taking action right now and have been acting for many weeks and even months. The UK, however, is not.
It is interesting to see where these other countries are perhaps investing their efforts, because sort of subsidising, reducing the cost of using public transport, for example, that's obviously going to help with the fact that the cost of living itself is rising. Whereas in the UK, the government have set up these slightly more direct direct cost of living payments, especially to vulnerable households. Do you see kind of any advance on what the government has already put in place in that respect? Do you think that they might adopt some of these approaches that the other countries are looking at?
Well, so, I mean, let's talk about the fact that I think we were actually talking on this podcast earlier this year, talking about the newly announced bill credit and bill help that the government will go to give to households as a result of the energy price cap being increased to 1,971. And clearly, that's before it went up by a further 80%. And so the reality is that the UK government do need to act to do something. Because the amount of help on energy bills alone might have been sufficient if prices didn't go up further. And now that we've seen them go up further, really the government needs to get back round the table to work out what they're going to do. And I had speculated that something will also be announced today in partnership with the fact that the price was going up, that they would also do something else. The fact that the government hasn't done that is quite astounding. It really does just demonstrate that, you know, the process of selecting a new prime minister is really hampering and slowing down this country from acting in its best interests. So, you know, let's remind ourselves of what's on the table at the moment. So every household in the UK will be given a bill credit of £400. Now, that will come in monthly chunks of £66 to £67 over the months of October through to March. So if you've got a direct debit, often that means your direct debit will go down by that much each month. So again, putting a little bit more money back in your pocket, or maybe not taking as much out of it, might be the better way to think about it. But if their households, pensioner households, will receive an extra £300 bill credit, and those who are in receipt of disability allowances will also receive a further £150. So, you know, this is the idea of trying to target more money at those most in need. And then low-income households in the receipt of benefits will separately be receiving £650 in order as a contribution to the cost of living. So these what I'm just mentioned, those are not new things. Those have already been announced. I'm not trying to do what government ministers do, is just re-announce old policy or old money over and over again. But really, the expectation is that more does need to be done, and exactly how that's done, you know, is yet to be seen.
No, well, especially considering the fact that, as you've already said, this is now going to be, the price cap will be reviewed every 3 months. It does seem that the government will perhaps have to step in and come up with perhaps further solutions if it continues to increase into the future.
Yeah, something will have to happen. Primarily because as a result of the announcement of the increase of the cap from October, is that some estimates place it that 50%, that's 50, half of UK households will now be in fuel poverty from October. And that's where a household is spending more than 10% of their take-home pay after housing costs on energy bills. Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, and we used to be talking about, like, oh, you know, there's 500,000 households in fuel poverty, and you know, what can we do about that, and how do we drive that down? Now, you know, with the fact that you know, over 13 million households are going to be in fuel poverty, it really is, you know, the question of heat or eat is a catastrophic question that will be asked by too many households unless the government does act.
We'll be right back after this message.
Do you want to stop wasting time on admin and jumping between different platforms to get just one job done? Do you want to focus on your agency's business goals instead? From automated offer letters and e-signing to online referencing and even rent collection, Goodlord can help your agency get rid of the admin-heavy parts of your lettings job in one integrated platform, so you can refocus on your business and your customers. Head to goodlord.co today to learn more. Goodlord, it's just that good.
So what can we perhaps expect then? Obviously, looking ahead to next year, do we have any predictions about where this is going? And obviously, hopefully, where the prices will start to come back down to more normal levels again?
Yeah, well, the prospects of the prices coming down to normal levels is way off. The Bank of England and other commentators are saying that these prices are here to stay for years, not months. And so that really should be one of the things that informs what households do, as well as what sort of government support is delivered. I would really like to see a nationwide insulation program, one where insulation is talked about, which is demand reduction. This is the idea. Like it's one of the things that hasn't been talked about enough in the UK, which is demand reduction. It's the idea of use less, not use less and be cold, but use less because your property is more efficient. And it goes beyond fitting efficient boilers. It goes beyond fitting double glazing. It goes to the idea of insulating walls, increasing the amount of insulation in lofts, and making sure that heating systems are running efficiently, draft busting, etc. So given that these prices are here to stay, and some forecasts are putting the price cap going from where it's going to be in October, which is about £3,500, to over £5,000 in January, and potentially £6,000 in April. But what's really important about when these numbers are banded about these future price cap expectations is that this is a process of analyzing the cost of delivering gas electricity on a daily basis. And in effect, as we get closer to the point when those are locked in, those numbers become more and more confident, and they stop wobbling about. I try to describe it as like using a snooker cue, holding it at the thick end and pointing the pointy end at a dartboard. It's actually quite difficult. It's wobbling all over the place. But as we get closer to the point of announcement, actually we start holding the snooker cue much closer towards the pointy end, and it stops wobbling about quite so much. And so those numbers, sound scary. They are scary, but they are not certain by any measure at this moment in time.
And obviously, with the fact that energy efficiency, it is a hot topic. It always has been in recent years, but especially now, there is new data which is coming out at the moment. I think Active Building Centre saying that significantly improved housing stock would allow the UK to offset its Russian gas imports more than twice over and reduce household energy bills by over £2,600. There was some research from Octane Capital that shows that just a third of rental properties currently have an EPC rating of C or above. I mean, how much of this do you think can be factored into all of this? The fact that minimum energy efficiency standards in private rented homes on new tenancies by 2025, it's anticipated that an EPC band C will be required. Will be moving fast enough to actually make a difference and to help support the private rented sector and ensure that tenants don't feel this impact quite as strongly as they may do otherwise.
And this really comes. Everything that you've said so far, is not new information in terms of both the quality of the housing stock that we have in the UK, the fact that it is amongst the leakiest in terms of heat in Europe, and we're not the furthest north or the furthest south, and the standards to which we aim to keep our buildings does need to improve. And so whether it's about spending that extra £1,000 to double glaze that room or those windows instead of just painting or maintaining as is, that's really where we're going. And as bills are hitting these astronomical highs, tenants will be looking at, well, how much is it going to cost to live there? Whoa, it's going to cost that much, because those numbers are on those EPCs. I think there will come a point, and I don't think we're far off it, where tenants are very actively choosing to live in those properties with lower bills. And this is the point that I hinted at earlier, which is in 2013, when we cut the green crap, to quote David Cameron, what we did is we defunded, we removed money from funding the nationwide insulation programs, where you used to be able to get free loft insulation, as an example. You used to be able to get free draft excluders and radiator panels as a part of this scheme. But by removing the funding from that, the rate of loft insulation, just as a measure, effectively went down by 90%. And this is one of the things where it is really telling that everyone knows that, it's a really good idea to insulate that. It'd be a good idea to add that extra layer of insulation either to the loft or under the floor, or to the walls, or the triple glazing instead of the double glazing, as an example. But it does take leadership and schemes that make these things happen and deliver them at scale and at pace, in order to really have an impact on a nation of poorly insulated buildings. We're also not building terribly efficient buildings either. And so as a result of lobbying by the house builders, new homes have not been what was going to be called zero carbon, meaning effectively they generated as much electricity over a year as they used. And it was the house builders convinced the government that it was too difficult, too expensive to do that. But the reality is that, yes, it would have cost more. That is true. But as a result, we have built homes that now need retrofitting with more insulation and more efficient appliances to heat them than we would have if the government had held their nerve. So we really do end up in a situation where we need to invest in our homes, and we need support from the government to do so, both from in terms of schemes and incentives to do so, and they should be leveled at being accessible by landlords, by homeowners, with a way for tenants to also engage with it in order to help reduce their bills more often than not.
It does seem to be one of those almost the last industries where consumer demand and what the expectations are of consumers within that industry hasn't necessarily pushed a change in that end product. You look at clothing and things like that, and obviously consumers have started demanding more eco-friendly solutions, sort of more being a bit more conscious of their choices. And it seems that property is perhaps one of those remaining industries that still needs to move in that direction to actually not only help the government achieve its goals in terms of energy efficiency and net zero, but also ensure that tenants, homeowners are getting what they want and what they need and what they're starting to really ask for right now, which is the energy efficient properties.
That's right. But, let's also be clear that the 80% of the properties and the homes that we'll be living in 2050 have already been built. So we're not about to see a sort of wholesale demolition of large swathes of homes, quite the opposite. But so the new houses we built needs to be built to good standards or great standards, and we need to be improving the quality and standards of our homes as well. And this is where it comes in, I think, which is that landlords will often look to their estate agent to advise them. What's going on in the market? What are people doing? What are tenants looking for? What can I get for my property in terms of either rental or sale value? And it is quite possibly at these transaction points where schemes and incentives could be leveled. So for instance, there are even green mortgages. So there are already plenty of stories of people being unable to get a new mortgage from a particular provider, to be clear, because their property did not meet an EPC band rating of C or better, as an example. And there are even ideas, these are ideas for policies, including which is that if you install a heat pump and remove your gas boiler after buying a property, that in effect you will get a refund or a partial refund on the stamp duty, as an example. And so this is what these are some of the sort of market-based mechanisms, i.e. at the point of transaction, which the government is considering in order to incentivize and promote the investment in our homes across the UK. Does it go far enough? Will it work quickly enough? Is really the question. And there is quite a lot of technology out there which helps. But estate agents, land agents, property agents are right at the forefront of being able to be the helpful advisor to landlords and future owners, to be able to sort of point in the appropriate direction. And tenants demanding more energy efficient buildings or ones with lower bills, is gradually or progressively acceleratingly creeping up the agenda.
And along those lines, I think that it's very recently this week, in fact, that that bills included. It's been in the news that the bills included is one of the most searched for terms in property searches. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's still a sustainable option for landlords and agents to be able to offer those?
I do. So you need to be careful who you work with in order to offer those propositions. So if you yourself, as a landlord, for instance, are offering it to your tenants, you need to be super mindful that if you are not fixing the energy prices that you're paying, you may well find yourself trapped between the rising cost of gas electricity in the house and your ability or inability to increase the rent to cover that. So I suppose when you need to be very mindful that that you're balancing appropriately the costs that you're expected to pay as well as the money that you collect. There are providers out there who will fix the contract, fix the price of gas electricity. That's fine. Those deals are fewer and further between these days. But it is a way of the tenant effectively trying to get that price confidence, that price security that, okay, I've got this monthly amount and that's all my bills covered. For now, at least, and that's where that appetite and demand comes from, whereby they are able to package it up and have one nice, neat, and simple solution. But also, we have there's always new generation, the TikTok generation, are progressively moving out of universities, halls of residence, and into private rental accommodation, and their expectations of the houses that they rent and the services that they get are very different to previous generations. They do want simplicity. They may well be willing to pay a little bit more for that nice packaged sort of conclusion. And so, the bills inclusive proposition, I think, is definitely here to stay, but it is being challenged by the rapidly increasing costs.
And perhaps just to round off our conversation, Rik, I mean, would you have any top tips in the ways that agents can advise their landlords, aside from, I know we've obviously covered some in our conversation, but any top tips in terms of how they can support them, what advice that they can give to them and their tenants as well?
Yeah, I would. So tenants in properties with combi boilers, which is increasing the vast majority. I would actively encourage them to Google how to run my combi boiler efficiently. And there are tips and tricks, including just turning the big temperature dial on the radiators down on the boiler. So this is about flow temperatures. It's literally a 10-second job and can save you 10% on your energy bills, which could be 350 quid, as an example. So that's for tenants. Very easy to do. Lots of YouTube videos about that, showing how to do that. When it comes to advising landlords, one of the things I do is say that when you next get the opportunity to be making improvements to your property, like I would, if you're just redecorating a room or redecorating throughout, do make sure you take the opportunity to put in that loft insulation or even top it up. It used to be that we talked about 10 centimeters or 4 inches being the appropriate amount. Now we're really talking about a foot. 12 inches of loft insulation being the sort of the ideal amount of loft insulation, as well as those drafty windows. You either get them seen to by a window doctor or appropriately replaced with some modern performing double glazing or even triple glazing. Like the investment in these properties for these energy efficiency measures, I have every expectation will pay dividends when it comes to needing to transact to them, either be renting them or to be selling them in the future. These are investments in an asset, and energy efficiency is both investment in the asset as well as the ongoing yield from those rental payments. So don't be afraid to do that, and also talk to your tenants. If you talk to your tenants, identify are there things that could be done to make the house more comfortable. Often it's comfort rather than otherwise, because a happy tenant is a tenant who's likely to pay their bills more often, and is likely to stay longer. And if they're not paying huge amounts on their energy bills, they're going to be more likely to be able to pay their rent going forward. So do have those conversations. They'll know where where it's cold, where it's drafty, and what could be done to improve it. That sort of constructive and productive conversation with your tenants could really pay dividends.
Those are some great tips to be sharing. And also on our Newsagent site, we do have some extra free resources there for agents to download, whether it's FAQs to share with your tenants and landlords, just keeping them up to date in terms of what's happening with the energy crisis, questionnaires that you can send out to your tenants just in case they're struggling to pay rent and so on. So I'll make sure that I pop some helpful links into the show notes just to go alongside this podcast. But otherwise, thank you ever so much, Rik, for joining me again just to talk through the most recent changes. It sounds like there are actually some positives for landlords and agents to take from this, just in terms of potential investment opportunities and just shoring up for the future, as well as some very helpful advice there for tenants and anybody struggling that may struggle to pay their energy bills over the next few months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susie.